Hello, welcome back to the Dash Show. This is Michael Nicula. Today we will be talking about government systems, the electoral process that is currently in Canada. Many people are talking about electoral reform. We are still using the same voting process that has been in use for decades, and arguably today we can do better. There's internet, there's online voting. Elections Canada is looking at online voting, but they're far from making a decision in that respect. And we're also asking, if we're voting online, why can't we vote directly on issues? Why are we still voting on political platforms or political parties as we did 100 years ago when the technology wasn't even there to support a better system, a direct democracy system that everybody's talking about nowadays. So this and much more in today's show. Please enjoy and watch.
My name is Nick Savage. Today on the Dash Show, we will be talking about government systems, and we have an excellent panel for you. We have Michael, Nella, and Lawrence from the Action Party. Guys, take it away.
Hi. We hear about electoral reform in Canada. What does it mean and what can be reformed?
There's no question that there's a need for electoral reform in Canada, but there's also a need for political reform and monetary reform as well. The elections, the electoral process is a problem, but not our only problem. Stephen Harper has talked about reforming the Senate, but now that he's got a majority, both in the Senate and in the Parliament, I really don't see that reform happening anytime soon.
Well, especially not since his hockey team is doing so well, too. I mean, it's just, he's slam dunking all over the place these days.
Another aspect that I want to bring to attention here is that the part of the political reform, it could be the role of media. Media has a very big role in the political process. Media basically, at this point, we have the power of media is concentrated in just a few hands. And basically and there are people from the corporate world, as you know very well. They're the CEOs of the big media corporations, which now have merged written media, radio, TV stations. They own pretty much a lot of media power. And those people, they get together and they decide basically for the Canadian people who's going to be on the ballot or not.
They also get together and get drunk and laugh at us. That's the other thing they do together.
And they also play a lot of golf. Now,
yeah, but they don't invite me. That's what the problem is.
Yeah, so in the last federal elections, there was the commission of the media executives who decided that only 4 parties are going to be invited to the final debate, the actual debate. Now, Canadians, they don't watch the small debates. They watch the one big debate. And whoever sits at that table gets the attention of the voters. If you're not sitting at that table, nobody knows about it. Many people, many Canadian voters don't even know there are more than 4 or 5 Canadian political parties. In fact, there are 19 of them. But they never heard of them because they were never invited to any of these debates. Even if they are basically have every right to be on the ballot, but they're not, because they're not invited by the media, then people don't know about them and they have zero chance to even have a seat in the parliament.
They actually invited the Communist Party, but as a group they couldn't decide whether to go or not.
Yeah, but the Communist Party actually said they were not invited. And the Green Party, which arguably is big enough, okay, I understand that they may make the argument that their 10, 12 political parties are too small to be even invited, which I don't agree with. Again, I think if they're registered, they should be invited.
Well, that's the problem. You know, first of all, media ownership laws in this country were changed under the Mulroney administration, We used to have laws in this country that said you couldn't own more than one television station, radio station, or newspaper in the same market. Those media ownership laws were thrown out under the Mulroney administration. The result of that is we now have like 3 people that control the media right across the country. And do they restrict the debate? You bet they do. One of the biggest problems is that people in Canada, as well as other Western democratic countries, think that they're living in a democracy. We don't. There is no democracy in Canada. When you have a fourth estate that only covers the 3 major parties in the country, all of those parties are basically controlled by the same people. Every prime minister we've had since Lester B. Pearson have all worked for the same guy. They've all worked for Paul DeMarais of Power Corporation. Brian Mulroney sits on the board of directors of Power Corporation right now. Paul Martin got his shipping company from Power Corporation. Jean Chrétien's daughter married into the family. Trudeau worked for Power Corp. So do we really have a democracy in Canada? I'd say we don't. Not when Power Corp can buy both the Liberals and the Conservatives. Basically, they're the same people. So, you know, if we're going to sit here and talk about electoral reform, political reform, you know, we've got to recognize that basically Canada, and not just Canada, but every other Western country, Australia, New Zealand, all the European countries, you know, we talk about democracy, but we don't actually have a democracy. Mussolini defied fascism as a state that's controlled by the banks and the corporations. And basically, if we want to go by Mussolini's definition of fascism, in Canada, we're living in a fascist state.
So how, as you know, the individual man, can I speak to the CEO of the Power Corporation and get some answers?
Well, you could no more have access to the CEO of say Bell Telephone than you do to the Prime Minister. Matter of fact, at least you've got a better idea of where the Prime Minister is likely to be at any given time. You got a better chance of tracking down the Prime Minister than you do the CEO of any large
Plus, it's very
corporation.
likely that the Bell guy has a phone.
In conclusion, I would like to add that the way things are right now is that we have a Conservative government that was just given a majority number of seats in the parliament. That doesn't mean they won the majority of the Canadian voters. As you can see on the Elections Canada's website, they only got under 25% of the votes of the Canadians who had the right to vote.
Might as well that they did.
They did, but now they have a majority number of seats in the parliament. So basically, they can pass any laws they want. So the opposition can talk day and night. Advocacy group can talk day and night. The Conservative government right now has the right to do anything they want. It's pretty much a dictatorship in a way of a group of people, not of a single person. So what do we do for the next 4 years? If we think, and a majority of Canadians think that there's a need for electoral reform, political reform, you call it any way you want, what can be done? Because the government has obviously no interest whatsoever to reform anything. They're going to, as you mentioned earlier, they're going to even slow down the Senate reform that the Prime Minister was talking about, because now they have a majority there too. So I don't see any reform coming our way anytime soon. So the question is, what can be done to actually even start or get the Canadians talking about reform? The only way we can do, at least the Online Party of Canada has put on the website a number of issues on the electoral reform, political reform, all kinds of reform, where people can go and vote, comment, participate online all the time. We don't have a deadline for the voting, so it happens continuously. That's the part that we can do. I don't know. I'm asking what is your party doing to, like, meanwhile, between now and 2015, what is the...
Well, you know, for one thing, the Canadian Action Party came out in support of the Occupy movement. A couple of 3 weeks ago, thousands of people marched in the streets in the city of Toronto. at the beginning of the Occupy Toronto movement. This is going on in every major city across Canada. You know, people are occupying parks, they're occupying public spaces. There's no question in my mind that Canadians have said that they're not happy with the way things are and they want change. You know, when you're talking about political change, and again, this is not only true for Canada, but for most of the world. For real political change to happen, you can't sit around and wait for the powers that be to hand it to you, because they're not going to. I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of public unrest. Hopefully, you know, in Canada, it's not going to go the way that it's going in Greece right now. But outside of the parliament in Greece, there are thousands and thousands of people that are going to shut that institution down until the government starts listening to what the people really want. You know, they've had it up to here with austerity measures so that the government can take their tax money and give it to private bankers. That's going to end. Now, the way I see it is there's only two ways that could go. Either it ends in a violent, bloody revolution where institutions fail and people get killed, or the public gets fed up enough to the point to where they just shut down these systems of government. So, you know, either we're going to have political reform in this country, or people are not going to allow the political system to function at all. And if you think that it's not a possibility that Canadians will get pissed off enough to surround the Parliament buildings and shut business down, I think you're wrong. If we were looking at the same kind of austerity measures in Canada that the government are imposing upon the people of Greece or Italy or Portugal right now, you bet Canadians would get out and shut down Parliament. And let's face it, there's only two ways this is going to happen. Either we have political reform or we have a violent, bloody revolution. And I don't see that happening in Canada. So yeah, we will have political reform. The question is how much political reform and when, but it is going to happen.
You don't think we could meet in the middle and, you know, sort of like have occasional conversations followed with like slapping fights and then back and then some more slapping fights and then more talking? You think it's either going to be
well, if that's what you're
bloodshed
interested in, go down to St. James Park and enjoy the Occupy movement.
Well, that has been a great debate from our panel. I'd like to thank them again, Michael, Nella, and Lawrence. You guys have been excellent. For the Dash Show, this is Nick Savage. Have a great one. Now, before discussing Canada's system and government, perhaps it's important to note that all democratic government systems inherently suck. Now, the reason for this is the fact that your fellow citizens have the same voting right that you do, despite the possibility that, at best, they disagree with you politically, or at worst, are remarkably stupid. One only has to look to the South to see what effect a badly educated populace can have on its democracy. Poor, ignorant, buck-toothed sops fight tooth and nail for tax cuts for the wealthy in the name of economic equality. If you can find something stupider than that, you let me know. Now, while Canada is a relatively stable and boring government system, it isn't without its flaws. A figurehead executive and appointed Senate leave most of the political power in Ottawa to be wielded by the Prime Minister, or Bouse. Now, depending on the number of seats he has in the House, the Bouse will form a particular type of government. And believe me, both of them suck. Majority governments, one in which the Prime Minister controls a majority of the seats in the House, are efficient because they pass any legislation they want without any real heavy lifting. However, it's one thing if your party's the one with the finger on the trigger. It's quite another to have the barrel shoved down your mouth for 4 or more years. Also, the Prime Minister invariably gets drunk off his power and gets caught in a corruption scandal. Don't believe me? Ask Brian Mulroney, Ben's dad. Minority governments are the opposite. The Prime Minister is a politically neutered puppy who has to play with the other parties and get along. However, while compromise may seem ideal, invariably, nothing gets done. And any legislation that is passed is essentially a garbled up flaming bag of law garbage. Now, there's a lot of talk about reforming the Senate, And most of the arguments boil down to this. People don't like to pay people who don't go to work, especially with their own tax dollars. And about a third of senators are those people. So what's the solution? Should we elect them rather than appoint them? No! God, no! We already have one overly politicized legislature that gets nothing done already. Do we really need two? For The Dash Show, I'm Nick Savage. Thank you.
Welcome back. Thank you for watching the show. I hope you find it as interesting and as fun as I do. If you want to know my opinion or if you want to vote, comment yourself, you can go on the website www.onlineparty.ca. Thank you for watching the Dash Show. This is Michael Nicula.